It was just after 10:30 p.m. when I parked my old, beat-up sedan in the employee lot of the Blackwood Hotel. The windshield wipers squeaked across the glass, barely keeping up with the rain that poured down like a waterfall, as if the storm was never going to let up. I sat there for a moment, staring at the flickering neon vacancy sign that barely cut through the thick fog hanging in the air, the kind of fog that made the whole world feel small or closed off. There was no life out there tonight, just me and the old hotel waiting for me to clock in. I sighed, grabbed my jacket from the passenger seat, and stepped out into rain. It immediately soaked through my jacket, and I shivered as I jogged toward the hotel side entrance. The building loomed over me, dark and silent, almost as if it were watching me approach. I tried to shake off the feeling it was just a job, after all. The Blackwood Hotel had once been the pride of the town, back when it opened in the late 1920s. The lobby used to be full of elegant guests dressed in the finest clothes, sipping cocktails in the grand parlor. Now, it was a shadow of its former self. The carpets were threadbare, the wallpaper peeling, and most of the rooms stayed empty. But it had character, if you could call it that. Character and a strange energy that I could never quite explain. The night shift suited me, though. I didn't mind the quiet. It gave me time to think, to focus, and I could avoid most of the hotel's other employees. It was just me in the empty halls and a handful of guests on any given night. There's only be us on any given night. As I stepped inside, the warm, musty air hit me like a wall. It always smelled the same, like stale cigarettes and old wood. I shook off the rain and made my way to the front desk, where I found the night log waiting for me. There was a note from Jeff, the evening manager, 5 guests tonight. Room 213, 317, 401, 402, and 505. Keep an eye on 505, complained of strange noises. Great, I muttered on my breath. The Blackwood had a way of creaking and groaning at night that would drive anyone a little crazy. But that was normal for a building this old. At least that's what I told myself. The first few hours of the night were routine. I did the usual rounds, checking the security cameras, making sure the doors were locked, and resetting the glitchy elevator, which always had a habit of getting stuck between floors. There was something unsettling about walking through the long, dimly lit halls at night, but I'd gotten used to it, at least mostly used to it. Around 1 a.m. I decided to take a break and grab a cup of coffee from the tiny staff kitchen near the back of the lobby. I was stirring the sugar, and when the desk phone rang, a loud ring echoing through the empty lobby. I jumped, nearly spilling my coffee before I hurried back to answer. Front desk, Blackwood Hotel, I said, trying to sound professional even though my nerves were a little frayed. Hi. Yeah, this is room 505. Sorry to bother you, but there's this weird noise. It's like a tapping or something. It's been going on for an hour now, and I can't sleep. Could you come check it out? It was a man's voice, maybe in his 30s. He sounded a little soft. They was trying to keep calm. I knew what he was talking about. The hotel's pipes were ancient, and sometimes they made all sorts of weird noises at night, but it was my job to check it out. Sure, I'll be up in a minute, I said, hanging up and grabbing the keys to the utility closet. I figured I might need a wrench or something to tighten a loose pipe. As I made my way up to the 5th floor, I couldn't help but notice how unusually quiet the hotel felt. Sure, it was the middle of the night, but even the usual creaks and groans seemed to have disappeared. My footsteps echoed in the long hallway, the dim, flickering lights casting long shadows along the walls. When I reached room 505, I knocked gently. The door opened almost immediately, and the man inside looked relieved to see me. He was wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and pajama pants, his hair a mess, dark circles under his eyes. Thanks for coming, he said, stepping aside to let me in. I don't know what it is, but it's been driving me crazy. It sounds like it's coming from inside the walls. I stepped into the room and listened. Sure enough, there was a soft, rhythmic tapping, like something gently knocking against the walls. I frowned. It didn't sound like the usual pipe noise. Too precise, too deliberate. Where's it coming from? I asked. I think it's over by the closet, the man said, pointing across the room. I walked over, pressing my ear to the wall. tapping was louder here, almost as if someone was on the other side of the wall, knocking. Maybe it's the plumbing, I said, though I didn't really believe it. Let me check the utility room on this floor. It could be something with the heating system. I'll be right back. The man nodded, though he looked far from reassured. I grabbed my flashlight and headed down the hallway toward the utility room. The 5th floor always felt different from the others, colder, darker. The lights here flickered more than anywhere else, and there was always a faint, musty smell, like the place hadn't been used in years, even though it was just as occupied as the rest of the hotel. I unlocked the door to the utility room and stepped inside. The air was colder in here, too, and I could hear the faint hum of the old heating system. I shined my flashlight around, checking the pipes along the wall. Everything looked normal. No leaks, no rattling pipes. But the tapping sound from room 505 still echoed faintly, coming from somewhere deep within the walls. So that's when I noticed something odd, a small door at the back of the room. It partially hidden me behind a stack of old boxes, and it looked like it hadn't looked you in years. I moved the boxes aside, revealing a narrow, rusted door with a padlock hanging loosely from the latch. I hadn't noticed it before in any of my previous rounds, but the Blackwood was full of hidden nooks and crannies. It wasn't that strange, except for the fact that I could swear the tapping sound was coming from behind me. I stared at the door for a moment, unsure whether I should even bother. I even bought like it led to some forgotten maintenance tunnel or room, but the sound was unmistakable. It wasn't just tapping, it was a soft scratching, like nails dragging against the inside of the wall. My stomach twisted with unease. Just get it over with, Jake, I muttered to myself, grabbing the old padlock. To my surprise, it wasn't locked, just hooked onto the latch as if someone had left it there. I set it aside and pulled open the door. Inside was a narrow staircase spiraling down into what looked like an old basement level. My flashlight barely cut through the darkness, but I could see the stone steps disappearing into the black. The air that wafted up from below was damp and cold, with a faint metallic smell like rust or blood. I hesitated. This didn't feel right. The Blackwood had plenty of odd, unused spaces, but I'd never heard of this. And why was it hidden like this behind a stack of boxes? But that sound scratching, tapping, it was coming from down there. I couldn't just ignore it. Taking a deep breath, I started down the stairs, each step creaking under my weight. The deeper I went, the colder the air became and the more oppressive the silence grew. By the time I reached the bottom, my breath was visible in the freezing air, and my flashlight flickered weakly, struggling to stay on. At the base of the stairs was a narrow, low-ceilinged hallway. The walls were made of rough mid-rough stone, and they were old. Rusted pipes running along the ceiling. The scratching sound was louder here, echoing off the stone walls, and it was accompanied by something faint whispering, just on the edge of hearing. Hello? I called out, my voice silence falling cold, empty space. The whispering stopped, but the scratching continued, growing louder, more frantic. My heart raced as I followed the sound down the hallway, my flashlight flickering wildly as I turned the corner. Ahead, I saw an old wooden door, barely hanging on its hinges. The scratching was coming from behind it. I approached slowly, my hand trembling as I reached for the door handle. The metal was ice cold under my fingers, and as I turned it, the door creaked open, revealing a small, dark room. My flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into complete darkness. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, I heard a soft, wet whisper right behind me. Help me. I spun around, but there was no one there. The room was empty, save for the faint outline of something HUD, lead in the far corner. My heart pounded in my chest as I backed away, my flashlight flickering back to life just long enough to reveal the figure, a gaunt, skeletal figure. Its skin stretched tight over bones, eyes hollow and dark. It reached out a bony hand toward me, its voice a rasping whisper. Help me. I stumbled back, my heart hammering in my chest as the figure dragged itself toward me, its nails scraping across the stone floor with that same scratching sound I had heard from the walls. I turned and bolted, my footsteps echoing through the narrow hallway as I sprinted back to the stairs. The whispering grew louder behind me, but I didn't dare look back. I raced up the stairs 2 at a time, bursting back into the utility room and slamming the door shut behind me. For a moment, I stood there gasping for breath, my pressed against the door. The scratching had stopped, but the whispering still echoed faintly in my ears. I glanced around the utility room, half expecting to see the gaunt figure standing there, but it was empty. I fumbled with the padlock, hooking it back onto the door and pushing the boxes back into place. Whatever was down there, I wasn't going to let it out. I made my way back to the lobby, my heart still racing, but everything was quiet, too quiet. The usual hum of the hotel's heating system, distant creaks and groans of the building member was there. It was as if the entire hotel had gone silent, holding its breath. I glanced at the clock. It was nearly 3 a.m., but something was off. The lights in the lobby flickered, and I could swear I felt a chill in the air, like the cold from the basement had followed me. Suddenly the phone rang, the sound startling me so badly I nearly jumped out of my skin. I hesitated before answering, my hand trembling as I picked up the receiver. "Front desk, Blackwood Hotel," I said, my voice shaky. For a moment there was nothing but static on the other end. Then, a voice faint, distorted, but unmistakable. "Help me." I slammed the phone down, my heart racing. I backed away from the desk, glancing around the empty lobby. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. The hotel felt different. It felt alive. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't alone. The next few hours passed in a blur. I sat at the front desk, unable to focus, my mind racing with what I had seen or thought I'd seen. Was I going crazy? Had I imagined the figure in the basement? The scratching? The voice on the phone? I kept telling myself it was just the hotel playing tricks on me. Old buildings made weird noises, and my mind was probably just overreacting to being alone on the night shift. But the more I tried to convince myself, the less I believed it. Around 5 a.m. I decided to do another round of the hotel. Maybe moving around would help clear my head. As I made my way through the halls, everything seemed normal until I reached the second floor. The lights were flickering more than usual, casting strange shadows along the walls. I could hear the faint hum of the elevator, but it sounded off, slower, somehow. And then there was the feeling like I was being watched. I glanced over my shoulder. The hallway behind me was empty. I tried to shake off the unease, continuing down the hall. As I passed room 213, I heard something. A faint whispering just like before. I stopped listening. It was coming from inside the room. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. I knew I shouldn't go in, but some force drew me toward the door. I unlocked it and stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was empty. No guests, no furniture. Just an empty, dark room. But the whispering was louder now, echoing off the bare walls. And then I saw it in the corner of the room. A dark figure, just like the one I had seen in the basement, crouching low, its bony hand reaching out toward me. "Help me." I bolted from the room, slamming the door shut behind me. I ran back down the hall, not stopping until I reached the lobby. By the time the clock struck 6 a.m., the sun was beginning to rise, casting a faint glow through the fog outside. I had spent the last hour sitting at the front desk, trying to make sense of what happened. The phone hadn't rung again, and the hotel had been silent since I left the second floor. As the morning shift arrived, I handed over the night log without a word. I didn't mention the basement, the scratching, or the figure I had seen in room 213. They wouldn't believe me anyway. But as I walked out of the hotel, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't really leaving. That whatever I had seen was still there, lurking in the shadows of the Blackwood Hotel, waiting for the next unlucky soul to work the night shift. And as I glanced back at the building, I saw a figure standing in one of the windows, watching me leave. When I hurried to my car, not daring to look back again. The Blackwood Hotel would never be just another job, not after what I had seen. And I knew I wouldn't be the last to experience its horrors.